Uh, Welcome to Rasa Office Hours. Today I am joined by Ella, who is a success engineer?
Solutions engineer.
Solutions engineer. Dang it.
It's
Do you want to talk
it's
a
a
little
customer
bit?
success engineering team. There's lots of different titles.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what it is to be a solutions engineer? I did the right one this time.
Yeah. Yeah, so basically, what it means is that I'm an engineer who also works with our customers. I've been at Rasa for over 2 years now, so I've been involved over that like entire pipeline. I've been involved from the sales side of things all the way through like helping customers build their first POCs into putting bots into production and kind of expanding based on that. So that's kind of the main aspect of my job. But I'm also like a lot of what we do involves training people who use our product, and that also kind of reflects on us being in the community. So I think that a lot of people probably recognize my name from the forum and things like that. We like my team is very active, not only helping people out on the forum, but also we are in charge of all of the demo bots. So help desk assistant, financial demo, Sarah, those are our projects that we put work into to kind of make them reflect, hopefully, some of the best practices that we're trying to show off.
Yeah. And I think on the stream we've gone to the help desk assistant the most often because it has a little like handoff example. And I get a lot of questions about that. And I'm always
Yeah.
like, go look at Ella's beautiful code.
I actually demoed that one on Monday, so got the whole
It's a good one.
UI up and did the handoff, which is fun.
All right, let's go to the chat. We've already got a couple of questions.
Awesome.
So the first one is from Papa SI, I'm guessing. How to install Rasa on my own servers?
Cool. So yeah, if you're just installing Rasa open source, normally you can just pip install Rasa. That tends to be available on if you're on Mac or Windows. Usually you can do that. Sometimes you need to get pip in order to do that. So depending on what platform you're on, you might have to like apt-get pip in order to do so. But yeah, as long as you're connected to the internet and you can pull stuff from PyPy, you should be able to use our instructions to install Rasa. So if
And
you
I will
have any
say
problems, feel free to let us know and we can help you out through this.
the most recent version of pip, which I want to say is like
Oh,
20.2.3 as of today, which is January 27th, 2021. There's like a dependency resolving thing that's getting people stuck in a loop. So
yeah,
I
I've heard
would
that pip has been
downgrade.
a little troublesome lately.
Yes.
I think they're finally dropping 3.5 support for Python, and things like that have been issues. But yeah, when in doubt, you can always downgrade your pip to something like 19, where we don't usually have problems.
Uh, yeah, so hopefully that answers your question. Uh, Papa? I don't know how the
Is
pronunciation
this the
is.
best part of the stream where you just have to
Guess
read a bunch
people's
of
names.
usernames?
Yeah, I apologize to everyone whose names I mispronounce. Uh, Actually, if you would put it in the International Phonetic Alphabet, that would genuinely help me, but I never expect people to know IPA.
Or just add a little pronunciation in your.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question is from Tatiana. I have a question about control over synonym lists in uploaded Rasa models. Is there a way to specify that certain entity is seen as part of a synonym list only for certain only for some intents? For example, I want Rasa to know the words order and product are synonyms in one intent, but they are not interchangeable in all other intents. How do I specify that correctly in a Rasa Markdown file?
Interesting. I don't think that's something you can do out of the box right now. It sounds similar to feature requests that I've heard of, but I don't think it's actually the same. What I will say is that I think that you could pretty easily expand upon the entity synonym mapper in order to implement that behavior. So basically, when you get to that point in the pipeline, if you have your synonym mapper actually after your intent classifier in your pipeline, I believe that it should get that, like usually everything that's output by the different components is going into the next one, whether it's going to be used or not. So ideally you'd already get, you know, the entity, that sort of extraction information, and then the intent that was classified, and you could actually decide if you wanted that mapping to be valid or not based on the intent. As to how you would go ahead and make that part of the training data so that your mapper could use it, I believe the 2.0 format allows you to specify metadata for each of your inputs. I think the example format is a little less user-friendly when you decide to specify metadata, but I believe it is something that you can do now in 2.0. So the idea behind adding that metadata is, like, for example, if you're doing a sentiment analysis component, you would want to add sentiment to each of the user messages. You could do a similar thing where you add metadata to a user message, or I believe you can also add metadata to a specific intent. And maybe you could do it like that, where you say, in this intent, I have a list of synonyms that I want to map or don't want to map. However you kind of decide to check that out, I guess.
So I pulled up metadata in the docs. This is not it.
Yeah, I think that's metadata that comes in with the user message.
Okay, so would that be in the...
So yeah, this is
SDK?
a good question if this is well documented or not. It would be on the training data format page. And then if we were look to training examples, yeah, so you can see, yeah, just go to training examples there. However, it's also possible to use an extended format. So this is giving metadata to specific examples here. And then I don't know if we have, oh yeah, you can also specify this metadata at the intent level. So that might be probably a better option for you. If it's on the intent level, then it'll be easier data-wise to provide it at that level. So these are arbitrary key values that you can provide. So you could say metadata, synonyms, or like synonyms to map, and then provide a list of synonyms to map, and then you can process that information in your NLU pipeline, a custom component.
Yeah. Great question, Tatiana. I hope that answers it.
This is fun.
I'm gonna go back to... It is fun.
Just get to speculate about things.
And now the browser is no longer visible.
Oh no.
All right, going down. Oh no, I intentionally turned it off. Nick says hi and welcome. Thank you. Ganesh says hi, Rachel and Ella. Hi, Ganesh. Tatiana says, I've seen synonym entities controlled on other NLP platforms, but I don't understand how Rasa does this.
So just understanding synonyms in general?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so I think the common misconception is that if you go to synonyms here, you're providing a list of basically things that you want to map to a certain value. So what you're saying when you provide a list of synonyms is, if I pick up an entity that contains the value credit card account, I'm just going to replace the value with the word credit. And that is pretty standard. People tend to get that. Where the confusion lies is this isn't a list of things that should be picked up as an entity. So it's not a list of examples for an entity. That would be a lookup table. What this does is it's only post-processing the entity. So in order for this mapping to work, the phrase credit card account actually needs to get picked up as an entity first in the text. What that means is if you only have examples in your NLU data where credit is actually marked as an entity, if someone puts in credit card account, it probably won't pick up that phrase as an entity. So when you're using synonyms, you want to, if you're providing them in a list like this, you want to make sure to also provide examples where that entity is used. And you can do that by doing it in the second format there, where you actually just use the original phrase, and then in the kind of the information bit, you tell it what value to map it to. So these are two ways to provide synonyms. And the reason behind having these two is that like you want to have a few examples with the full phrases here, but then otherwise you can just like count on that list to make sure that those values are going to get mapped. If you're looking for kind of a way to provide a list of possible entities for something, so the example that I think we use for lookup tables is usually, oh, we've got banks here. We usually use like currencies. If you want to say there's a list of things that I already know are currencies, and I can try to put them all into my training data, but I also might as well just provide this list. Then you can add a list of a lookup table, and what that does is it will, depending on how you use the regex features, it can either help you help your intent classification and entity extraction just by adding more features to the model. You basically add a feature for each example that says, did anything in this lookup table show up in the example? And it helps the model recognize that information and classify it to the right intent or extract the entity. And then if you decide to use the regex entity extractor, you could just extract those like directly. So you could say, if I pick up euro, no matter what the context is, I'm going to count it as a currency. And so those are kind of the two different ways that you might use regular expressions. And it really depends on your use case if it makes sense to extract it every single time or not.
Thank you. I hope that was helpful, Tatiana. I feel it was a very good, cohesive, comprehensive, woof, discussion.
Right? I don't really know.
It's also cohesive, yeah.
Words, honestly.
English is hard.
Yeah, there's just like
speaks
so many synonyms coming back. Yeah, so many unnecessary synonyms. See, even NLU would be much easier if we all just said the same thing that meant.
That's true. We can all speak Lojban like a bunch of nerds. Lojban is a constructed language. It's not usable.
Now I want to learn.
I wouldn't recommend it. Ali says, what's the best way to integrate my own Android iOS app in Rasa X that works on a server?
Ooh, interesting. Okay, so this is going to depend on like how you are getting information from the user, I guess. But when it comes to channel integrations, essentially what you need is you basically have two options for something custom like that. Is you can use the inbuilt REST channel, which essentially all it is the channel itself is an HTTP server where you can send messages to it. So basically your app can have code that calls an API, and that should, I mean, no matter what your app is written in, it should be able to call other APIs, so it shouldn't be a problem. You just provide essentially on your server, you would have Rasa X, and Rasa X would be running your Rasa open source model, and you can provide that URL to be able to send messages to it and receive them back. And that's kind of the default behavior of a REST channel. If you don't need that much like crazy stuff coming from it, then that's what I would recommend to start. You can also build a custom channel. And what that does is it allows you to basically do some pre-processing of information and post-processing. So for example, you could do some security things that make sure that the you're getting information about who the user is. You're sending in extra information through about kind of extra information that you have around the user and their name and their location, things like that. And for example, coming out, you could pass extra information that allows the front end that you have to make special UI components, like, you know, if you click on a certain part of the message, maybe it'll bring you to a different part of the app. So that might be a reason that you want to extend to a custom channel. But I would start with the REST channel, just because it doesn't require implementation on your side, and work with that until you've gotten to a point where you say, okay, I need some custom behavior. I want to kind of go ahead and make this my own. I would go with that. Yeah, and then what Rachel's shown up here is very helpful. This is how to add the REST channel to your Rasa X deployment. So basically how to make that endpoint available for the UI to talk to. You want to add those credentials in. Yeah, and then the other thing I would point out is if you go to the Rasa open source docs, I think you can just search REST channel. There should be, on concepts, there you go. This just talks about kind of the REST input channel and what that looks like. And yeah.
Also looking at the rest of the name, it's probably Ali and not Ali. I hope that was helpful, Ali. And yeah, let us know if you build a cool app.
Yeah, I want to know more. I want to know what app you're integrating an assistant into. That's always fun.
All right. Wow, there's a lot of questions. Okay. It's a good thing. I'm not upset that there are a lot of questions. Hamid says, I'm willing to create a multi-turn conversation. My question, how to apply to a user with different options and remember the flow? Okay. So it sounds like you might have, Mohammed, experience with like a state machine based system where you sort of like provide the dialogue tree, potentially, just based on the way you've sort of phrased your question. And the easiest thing to do in Rasa is to provide example stories. And then we, depending on what dialogue policy you specify in your config file, it's a config file, right?
Yeah, the config.yaml would be where your policies go.
We would, like, that policy will, at every turn of the conversation, pick what the best choice is to do next. We read the question, reply to a different user with different options and remember the flow.
I think it's just about kind of providing the user with different options, maybe from an action or something. Maybe they're generated from a backend, and doing things based on that. And I think what you might be looking for there is setting a slot that actually influences the dialogue flow. Because you can set a slot, which is your bot's memory, and you can use it to drive the conversation. And so like you could have a slot where you are giving the user one of 3 options, and then you have a categorical slot that keeps track of which option the user chose, and can do things in the conversation based on that. And you can actually also do that on the fly where you don't know what the backend is going to fill those options with, but you can still do stuff based on whether it was the first, second, or third.
And let us know, Mohammed, if that didn't answer your question.
Yeah, feel free to write in more.
All right. Rashid has a multi-part question. Hi, Rachel and Ella. Hi, Rashid. I have a question. Suppose you have 2 forms, A and B. A has 1 slot, which has to be extracted from an entity which comes from intent X. Now, B has 2 slots, which have to be extracted from an intent Y. I give 5 examples for intent X and 20 examples for intent Y because these 2 slots were complex. The only slot for intent X is a JIRA number, and one of the slots in intent Y is also a JIRA number, but we need both of them to be different, so 2 different slots with different names. Problem. When the user says something to activate intent X, it does activate intent A correctly, but it labels the JIRA as a slot of intent Y. How can I make it tag it intent X? So if you have something where you have two pieces of information that are similar or the same entities, and you want to save them in different slots, how do you save them?
So, okay, so a slot in a form has, it's organized by what am I trying to fill and how do I want to fill it. So if I understand correctly, what's happening here is that they want to fill the same structure of information. So presumably they want to fill it from the same entity, but they only want to fill it from a certain intent. So I feel like there's two ways that this could be going wrong here. So let's say that the intent was predicted incorrectly. That's probably just like an NLU data structure deal. So like if both of these intents are only used for forms, then maybe they don't need to be different intents. Maybe they're both just kind of like a general inform one. If they're coming from the intent that's triggering that form, then maybe they're not different enough. I'm not sure with regards to that. But if the intent is picked up correctly, and the problem is that you are kind of filling the wrong forms slot because the entity type matches, then you want to add, if you go to there's a forms thing here, but we want to go actually to the forms page, I think would be give us more information about forms.
There we go.
Yeah, so if we go to slot mappings, I think that's what we want to go to. Yeah, so if we add the intent name, we can specify for each from entity mapping which intents are valid. So in form A, if you have that entity or that slot that you're trying to fill from intent X, you can say, I only want to fill it from intent X. If I get intent Y, then I'm going to let the rest of my policies make the decision. I'm not going to try to fill the slot. And then you would do the opposite for the second form with saying that only intent Y is valid here. I'm not going to fill it from an entity from intent X. And I think that will probably, that will certainly get you the behavior you're looking for. And if you are still running into issues, then it's probably more due to like the structure of your NLU data and what's being predicted there.
Yeah, and I would also, just as a very brief side note, you mentioned that you have a pretty different number of examples for each intent. And if you start to have really imbalanced numbers, ow, my hand on my desk, a really imbalanced number of examples for different classes, that can start to make the output be a little bit weird.
Yeah, I can start to predict intent B or intent Y more than intent X if you're providing similar data. The prediction side.
There we go. Yeah, I hope that helped. Ganesh says, I scrolled and lost it. How do you integrate display C in a Rasa pipeline?
To the Google.
I'm assuming this is a spacey thing because the C is big.
Display. You might have to look that.
Yeah, it's part of spacing.
Whoa. This is interesting.
It is a syntactic dependency visualizer.
Oh, wait. I think that this is just... This looks like the demo that I'm always looking for that I can never find. Wait, can you go scroll up to the top? This is not what I was looking at. Oh, never mind.
If you just need parsing, I don't think... So just... I have not used display C before, but based on this, all that this is doing is showing you a syntactic parse. If you just need parsing, you shouldn't need this, I believe. Because there's definitely a way to do parsing in Rasa with an existing component.
Yeah, so from the link that I found that I'm looking at, it says Spacey comes with a built-in named entity visualizer that allows you to check your model's predictions in your browser. So essentially, from what I'm understanding, is Displacey is a way for you to actually look at what Spacey would predict with something that you would put in. So this is a demo that I have looked for before. Rachel, I put it in the Zoom chat if you want to pull it up.
Thank you.
Because this is always what I'm looking at when I tell people to try out Spacey to see if it actually extracts the names that they're interested in, and I can never find it, so thank you. But yeah, so if you're looking for something that's going to let you test out what Spacey would pick up, you can do it right here. If you're looking to like find what your Rasa model would extract without having to like run your model and send messages like that, we have something called Rasa Shell NLU, which is just like a command line way to easily just see the parse data, or you can type in a message and it will output, okay, here is the intent, here is the list of ranking intents and competences and entities and competences and stuff like that. So you can see if your entity got extracted like you expected it to or not.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just sharing your link in the YouTube chat as well. The command line, so it would be the API.
I would go command line interface.
I'm just gonna
Search function is the best thing.
Yep.
Okay.
There we go.
Boom. So if you go to Rasa Shell, I believe it will also tell you Rasa Shell NLU, but if it doesn't, it'll be in the, there you are. So if you only want to see what the NLU parse data is going to look like, so what it extracts as entities and intents, then you can use Rasa Shell NLU.
Hope that helps, Ganesh. All right.
One of the perks of having me on is that I know where everything lives in the documentation.
That is a benefit.
One thing I did not mention at the start of this is that my team is also, we own the documentation. It doesn't mean that we write all of it, but it means that we're kind of in charge of it and what the layout looks like and what content needs to be added and things like that.
And you all do a great job.
Thank you.
All right, Tatiana says thank you.
Appreciate it. I thought there was more coming to that.
Vishnu says, how to switch between stories if the user doesn't follow our story?
I mean, great question. I mean, first of all, this is exactly what the machine learning policy is there for. So the idea behind it is to be this kind of fallback that is making predictions based on all of your stories to kind of decide what's the next most probable thing to do. If, you know, it's not following a story directly. That being said, a policy that I think is underused and very helpful is the augmented memoization policy. And it's something that took me a very long time to understand and be able to explain. Hopefully I can explain it to you and help you out there. So if you go to the policies page and pull that one up, I think that's there. So basically, if you've used Rasa, you're probably familiar with the memoization policy. What the memoization policy does is at a given point in the conversation, it will essentially look at the conversation history of the given max history number of turns. So if you say, I want to look at the last 5 turns, it'll look at the last 5 interactions between the user and the bot and check to see, do I have a story that matches this exactly? If so, I'm going to predict the next thing in that story. So I will predict the next action in that story. And that kind of makes a lot of sense. It seems like something you would want your model to predict because you've already laid out a story in which you say, here's a story that went well. So if something matches it for the last 5 turns, then it probably makes sense to recommend the next thing. What the augmented memoization policy is going to do is it's going to do that, but it's going to be a little more lenient. So it's described as a forgetting mechanism. And what it does is it progressively forgets steps in the conversation. So if you have a max history of 5, the first thing it does is exactly what the memoization policy does. So it looks at the last 5, and it will, make a prediction if it matches. If it doesn't find a match within the last 5, it will look at the last 4 and look to see if anything matches there and keep going. And then down to 3, 2, etc. So what it does is it helps you be able to say, okay, if the whole story, of the last 5 steps doesn't match, then that's okay. Maybe let's look at the last, few turns to see if we've seen something like this before and make a prediction based off of that. I find that it usually does a pretty good job. If you have modular chunks of stories like, you have just like one with greeting in it, then you can kind of still use those chunks together, which I find is nice. But what I will say is that that is a little restricted to basically saying the most recent thing is the most relevant thing, right? So it's only going to forget turns in a consecutive manner. And so it's good for places in which the most recent thing is relevant, but it's not quite so good for things with, interruptions, if users are jumping in with FAQs and stuff like that. And
that's what, I was just gonna say, that's what the TED policy will be able to handle, is when you're seeing things you haven't seen before.
Yeah, so the TED policy, its transformer is specifically good at figuring out what is relevant in a story and really focusing in on that. So instead of saying, either everything has to match or the last few things have to match, it can make predictions based on, okay, well, the earlier pieces of this conversation match up with this one, and even though this FAQ interruption came here, I'm still going to make the same prediction that came after in this other story, because that seems like the relevant pieces of information.
I hope that answers your question, Vishnu. I know a lot of other commercial dialogue system building systems, I don't know, tend to be a lot more rigid and tend not to be able to, you would have to have an example for everything that you want your user to do. I mean, the benefit of these sort of machine learning methods is that they are much more flexible and can handle different things.
Yeah. And I think what's good about Rasa is we have a kind of best of both worlds approach. So your pipeline should have this machine learning policy in it to be able to handle things like that, where users go off path and you don't have anything that you've specifically described for it. But you can also be certain that if you've written down a path for something, that it will follow that path. And if you've written a rule for something, it will follow that rule. So kind of you got the stable, and then you've got the nice backup to support it.
Predictable, but flexible.
Yeah.
All right. Ganesh has another question. How would you approach scrubbing data before they're used as training examples for the bot? I'm trying to mask names, phone numbers, and these can occur as the only thing a user mentions. Follow-up, any scrubbing tools you'd recommend? I'd honestly just do a regex search and replace, and I'd use a mask token. So we talked earlier about synonyms and having credit replacing, credit card or credit card account. I would pick a synonym for phone number.
Yeah, just map them all to 8675309.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I'll be a fake phone number.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the names, I don't think it's out yet. But if you have a list of names, that could work. If names are always capitalized, that could work. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what you do.
I think with PII,
place.
it's really hard because the concept of PII is we need to remove every single instance of it. But the concept of NLU is we need to teach a model how to extract this information. So there's two pieces that I find hard, and one of them is we need complicated models in order to be able to extract this information, and they're not always 100% correct. So if you're relying on those models to remove the information, then they're also not going to be 100% correct. And then the other thing is that those models to remove the information need to be trained on information that looks like the actual real information. So whatever model, if you're using a machine learning model and not a regex search, this is another reason for, using complicated regexes and stuff like that in order to do this, is that if you want to train models to do it, then you're going to have to use probably PII in order to train those models. So it's definitely a complicated problem.
Yeah, you could also, I mean, if possible, like generate names. Yeah. There's lots of sort of like, I would pick a name generation service that is going to match the linguistic origins of the names of your population of interest. So perhaps generated from like census data of the most popular names in a particular place where people are likely to use your stuff. But
yeah, so when we actually when we went ahead to open source Sarah, we actually had some PII from our sales form where people had entered emails and things like that, so we had to go in and replace those. What I would recommend as a process, I think, this is off the top of my head to just say, is that I would first, anything that was already identified, like as an entity, for example, in your training data, maybe replace it with a mask token, like you were saying, just so that you can see it. It's very obvious what has been already taken care of. And then take a human sanity check, scroll through the data to look for things that didn't get picked up or didn't get marked as entities correctly, just to make sure that you are catching that stuff. And then you can go ahead and replace that mask token with generated data.
Yeah,
as if you agree. Just replace it directly with generated data, it'll be really hard to look and see if something was originally PII or not.
Ganesh also has an example in the chat where apparently Google has a something that will do this, but it will mask things like San Andreas, which is the name of a fault in California, as San, and then Andreas is replaced with person name, or Kansas City as U.S. state city. So it looks like it's breaking apart entities that should be.
That's fun. Makes sense though.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will second Ella. At some point, you're going to have to just do a human evaluation step of your data. No getting around it.
But you can use things like regex and things that you've already identified entities for to speed up that process.
Definitely. Also Duckling, if you don't want to write your own regexes.
God bless Duckling, honestly.
Honestly, yep.
Everything with regard, like the email extraction is nice. I feel like I could write a fine email extractor regex. The dates, absolutely insane, absolutely amazing. Especially putting them into a format that's standardized.
A lot of person hours put into it and saved. Nick has a question, or Nick. My questions. I have a lot of data of question and answer FAQs in an Excel file. I only have 2 columns, question and answer. What is the best practice of pipeline to fetch the user query without manually uploading the nlu.yaml file and response in domain.yaml? It should fetch from the Excel file. Are you guys working on something related to GraphDB for FAQs to fetch user queries?
Interesting question. I wonder if training kind of a response selector separately on this would be interesting. I don't know.
Oh,
Because like if the
yeah.
idea is that you take the user input and then you check it against the database to get a response, like that's what the response selector is meant to do. And I would almost encourage you to, instead of using a custom action to do this, use a custom project importer to just read the data and train a response selector on it. But I don't know. That's my first thought, at least.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, I was talking to Ty about this earlier. Like, if you have a team where, like, one team is maintaining the FAQ database and another team is the one that's maintaining the bot, I can see why you'd want to break those things apart. Yeah.
I mean, so like the problem you're trying to solve here is that you need a way to figure out, based on the user input, which question should be, which question it should map to. What you might already have is some sort of like search functionality that you have. So like this reminds me of kind of a use case that we put into Sarah of like, we don't want to hard code answers to every technical question that anyone could ask. So instead we're going to use the search functionality that we already have and like strip the user's message of stop words and just throw it in there and see what comes out of it. And it actually works pretty well. So if you have anything like that that you could already make use of, I would recommend it. Yeah, that being said, if you're looking for a model to be able to perform that specific task, then I would recommend trying to train a response selector on it.
I hope that helps, Nick. Or Nick. I know that you this is something you've been working on for a while, so I hope you find success. All right. Oh, just as I was scrolling, I know somebody said my mug was good. Thank you.
Oh, what is it?
It says Python. It's good for you.
Cute.
Although this is like a greeny yellow, and it's just being picked up on my green screen.
Oh no.
I got it from Py Cascades, Regional Python Conference.
Remember conferences? In-person conferences?
I do.
Wow.
Although, I don't know, I'd sort of stopped going to them before. Just because it's very tiring. And it's just a lot easier to hop on YouTube and say hi to everybody here. For me, at least. Question from Giorgio. Rasa 2 API. Are there any plans to facilitate non-Python developers to use the Rasa platform API? My proposal is to rework the API documentation to facilitate any system integration.
So
it says 1 out of 2.
Sorry?
And there's a GitHub issue as well.
Oh, nice.
That he's mentioned.
Awesome. Yeah, so when it comes to the action server, which is I think where most people are doing the most Python coding on just like a non-customized bot, that's actually one thing that we wanted to make sure to highlight in the new documentation that we have. So you'll see that we have a section on Rasa SDK, but then also another section on all action servers. And what this is supposed to show you is that like Rasa SDK is built on top of this REST request that is being sent. The REST request will send over the tracker as well as the the action that needs to get called. And Rasa SDK has a lot of nice classes and stuff built on top of that to help you interpret that information, but you can do it in any language. So what we did on the all action server side is try to give you an idea of what that information is going to look like, so that you're able to kind of build things in whatever language you like in order to answer that request. So, I mean, it's certainly not, here we have a wrapper for you to use in every language. I think we actually had one of our developers build one in, gosh, what did Toby build an action server in just for fun? some like functional programming language or something. It's very fun.
Yeah, I don't remember.
But yeah, I mean, so like there's kind of two approaches you could take, right? You could build your server to just respond to this request by parsing the information, doing stuff with it, and returning, or you could make it a little project to build Rasa SDK in Node.js, for example. And if you decided to do that as a side project, I'm sure that other people would be really excited to see and use that. And kind of, you might have a side project that you maintain that's being used by people around the world, which I think would be super cool. And then
I'll say,
yeah,
we're mainly a Python shop, though.
yeah. I mean, because the base code is written in Python, that's kind of what we focus on. But the nice thing about a lot of these customizations that you can make by like adding Python modules for custom connectors or custom components is that you can always just call an API. You can make a custom component where all it does is send the information to an API in a language that you know how to handle. So that's always an option if you don't want to try to write a custom component in Python.
I hope that helps. Ali says, thank you. That we could help. Quas says, hello, thank you for the excellent video. Oh, thank you. It was SJ that said the mug was good. Cosmos says, I've been facing an interesting issue. What should I do with phrases that technically should fall into more than one intent? For example, okay, thanks should fall under affirm and thanks. I mean, I know what my answer is for this.
Me too.
Do you want to go first?
No, you go first. I've been answering lots of questions.
Oh yeah, it's your time to shine. I would stick that in end-to-end learning.
Yeah, try out our new feature.
Absolutely. New in 2.2. And basically what you do is you would don't do this for everything, but for short utterances that you don't think are a good match for one and only one intent. There's no... There we go. I wanted to show the training data format. So the way you would do it is in your story, you would say what the user says and then like straight up just the text that they say instead of the intent that it should be classified as. Yeah. So that's what I'm doing.
What might be interesting, I'm sending you a link, is we share the blog post that we wrote about this. And the sort of idea behind this is getting rid of intents because, they're putting things in boxes where they don't necessarily maybe need to have boxes. And that's something that we've talked about for a while. So this blog post can lead you through kind of the idea behind it and how it's implemented, and we would love feedback on it. So
and again, I wouldn't put your whole bot as end-to-end training right now. It's an experimental feature and intents definitely do have a place, but if you have, I just shared the link to the blog post in the YouTube chat, but if you have a an example like this, it doesn't need to be an intent. All right, next question from Jacques. I've tried uploading my model to Rasa X, but it keeps failing. The logs in the Rasa worker suggest CUDA 10.1 is missing. Oh, it's a CUDA issue.
The thing is
do I have to install these dependencies on my server?
I feel like if you see CUDA errors, you can almost always ignore them. TensorFlow is very annoying in the way that they write logs. They make them very hard to suppress. CUDA warnings usually mean that you're running on a CPU, and that's totally fine, but you can't use GPU functionality. And TensorFlow really wants you to know that for some reason. Yeah. So that being said, what I would do is make sure that your servers or your like Rasa production and your Rasa X and stuff are on debug mode, so get a lot more information. And yeah, other than that, it would definitely need to have more information. But yeah, get those debug logs, copy paste them into the forum, get on top of that.
The forum link. It's not a link, but it is
the forum
the URL. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That being said, always make sure that something that I don't know if everybody knows exists that I think is really helpful if you go to Rasa X and then you go to versioning.
The compatibility table?
Yeah. Make sure that you're running compatible versions of Rasa open source and Rasa X, because when you upload data by connecting to Git or you upload a model, it's going to try to run that based on the Rasa open source version that is running in your Rasa X instance. And if that's different from the Rasa open source where you trained the model, for example, then that could cause maybe an issue. Or if you're just running incompatible versions, it can get hairy.
Cause problems. Yeah, I think checking versions is always a good first step. Because
Always my first step.
I don't want to say it's easy to fix necessarily, because you can get into dependency hell, but it is often the problem, and the steps to fix it are pretty straightforward, but there might be a lot of them.
It also gives you a lot of context about what the code and what the UI and everything is supposed to look like at that version.
Yes.
So
hopefully that helps. Try debug, and then if you're still running into problems, to the forum. Minta is, Rasa is not working for the new MacBook M1 chip, CHIP. Whenever I try to install it, illegal hardware problem is showing. Is there a solution? Actually, maybe that's what Giorgio was sharing the GitHub issue link to.
Oh, that was the one about how do I install it on my...
right after the M1 chip problem.
Gotcha. I don't know anything about that yet. Like, I know that it's an issue that people have run into because we have Rasa developers who have started and gotten new machines and run into it too. So we're definitely aware of it and working on it, but I think it might be a dependency deal where we have to figure out when TensorFlow can run on the M1 chip in order to get Rasa running.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that, unfortunately. There might be more information on the browser. I, for once, doing Windows development is giving me not a problem. Yeah. Kevin says, I noticed that every time I share my bot using Ngrok, it works very slow. Sometimes there won't be any responses from the bot. I'm a Windows user and have tried it using 2 different laptops. Please help. There is a Windows issue that could be causing this. If you're using localhost in your sort of like if you are serving from localhost rather than like 1.217, the actual IP address, Windows 7 Plus, the way that it resolves localhost takes it's like a loop, and it takes about a second, maybe 2 or 3 seconds, depending on your system. So replacing localhost with the actual IP address might get you a really big speed up if it is this problem and you're on Windows 7 Plus. I don't know what else it could be.
Yeah, I haven't run into that same issue on Mac. The only issue, which I don't think is relevant here, is that if you have a lot of connections coming in, then you can run into Ngrok being like, can't handle this much.
Yeah, so try that, Kevin. And if you're still running into problems, I would post about it on the forum. Ganesh says, do you have an alternative to Duckling? Duckling, but fails for relative time references. For example, we'll be there in 5 captures the time as 5 p.m.
Honestly,
Yeah.
not that I know of.
Mm-mm.
Duckling is it, it has its qualms, but it is doing the best that it can, and it's doing the best that anything else can, in my experience at least.
Yeah. And this is like, because Duckling is based on like regexes and rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like this particular example is really more not idiomatic.
It's like,
No, yeah, it's an idiom.
Well, yeah, it's idiomatic. You're right.
Yeah, it's idiomatic.
Because what's there to tell you that it's going to be 5 minutes versus 5 hours versus 5 days? Nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a very hard problem. And I don't know of anybody doing it better than Duckling, unfortunately.
Take it up with GPT-3, see what it thinks.
Don't. I mean, you can. I don't want to stop you from doing it. I just would not recommend it. Vishnu said that helped. Glad to hear it.
I hope so.
Train them all again. Authenticate the Ngrok tokens. Oh, so this is about the somebody offering a suggestion for the long thing. Will Rasa join GSOC? I've heard this acronym before.
Google?
Oh, Google Summer of Code.
Oh.
I don't know. Yeah. I guess we're an open source, so you can. I mean, we have our own contributor program that is, I guess, kind of like Summer of Code. A little bit. Let me get the page up, and then I'll pop it up. So if you're looking for sort of like guidance and support and community, rasa.com/community/contribute. We have, a guide to starting to contribute. And we have a really nice project board with like, I'm zooming too far in, but different open issues with different sort of levels of, knowledge and time needed, and not all necessarily code issues. A lot of them are also like helping the community grow. Yeah, so if you're interested in contributing, we'd love to have you. I don't know that we're going to be joining Google Summer of Code. Yeah. Speaking of contributing, Mert says, I want to contribute, but I have a lot of errors when installing. I tried to use VMware, 2 Linux OSs, I will try Windows. I'm so interested in Rasa, but the situation discourages me. Yeah, we do have some videos on the YouTube channel about specifically walking through installation that might be helpful. We've got Windows 10, Mac, I forget what the Mac OS is, and then also Ubuntu 16.04, I'm pretty sure. So you might find that helpful working through your installation problems. Hi, Shiva. Ganesh says, unsupervised NER model, ?
Ooh.
I'm assuming that was sort of like in reference to something we were saying earlier.
No, I think just asking about unsupervised named entity recognition.
Hmm.
Or maybe that was with Duckling and...
Yeah. I wouldn't recommend it personally, is where I am on that. Oh, it could be also why the Google thing that people were talking about, where it was like state name city instead of Kansas City being recognized as a city. And then
mistakes
other
like that
folks
are all the more reason for supervised models.
Yes. Other folks helping Nick out. Sheep has a follow-up question, and this, it's 10 now. We have a couple more questions. Do you have time for another one, or I know it's you're in Berlin, so it's a little bit late for you.
Yeah, I don't mind.
Okay. Rashib says, follow-up question. I just tried adding the intent in the form slots for both the intents X and Y, but still facing the same problem. The intent is getting predicted correctly, but it's mapping to the wrong slot of the wrong form. This is with 2.0?
My only thing there is does your entity exactly match the name of the slot in the other form that's getting filled? Because if so, inside or outside of forms, we have this auto-filling mechanism that if an entity is picked up that matches the slot name, it auto-fills that slot. Maybe that's happening.
Yeah. Hopefully that helps, Rashib.
But this definitely sounds like a good use case for something to ask on the forum. And if you do so, I would recommend providing the slot mappings that you've defined, as well as kind of the extraction information of what intent got classified and what slots got filled. You can usually do that by posting some debug logs from Rasa Shell.
Yeah. And I'm just sort of scrolling through. We have a lot of questions, but I think I'm going to end with this one from Mert. And if we didn't get to your question, please feel free to head over to the forums and ask it there. Mert says, Ella, why did you do solutions engineering? I looked at your profile and saw you did machine learning engineering as an intern.
This is actually a funny story, which came up recently because my 2-year anniversary just happened. And so we kind of shared it throughout the company. It was kind of an accident that I got hired as a machine learning engineer, trainee or intern. And so basically I had applied for this role called machine learning engineer trainee, which is what just came out of my mouth. And that role was looking toward being on the solutions architect side, which is before the team that I'm on right now actually even existed. It was looking to be a more customer-facing machine learning engineer. And we were a very small company of about 20-ish people, with we have a whole people team now, a whole recruiting team. None of that existed. And so I actually got the wrong coding challenge and apparently did an impressive enough job that I got hired as a research kind of intern. And it was a fun time, but definitely not kind of the right fit. If you notice, when it gets into the deeper machine learning-y stuff, Rachel's definitely the person to answer those questions. That's not my forte. But luckily, while I was doing that, we were also a small enough company that I was still able to kind of jump on customer calls to see what that was like and help out with bugs on GitHub and stuff, and eventually found my way onto the path that I kind of had applied for originally, and that's how I ended up in the job that I'm in now.
I think there's we originally were planning on having Liam today to talk about career stuff, so I think it's a nice note to end on. Especially at small startups, job titles are a lot more malleable than they are at your Salesforce, your Google, your Microsoft, big companies.
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much, Ella. We got through a lot today. Lots of great questions from the chat. Thank you very much, chat. If you have other questions, please head to the forum. One more time. Forum animation. And tomorrow we will be back with the paper reading group. We actually have a paper from the Rasa community on building a Vietnamese language Rasa NLU model, which I'm really looking forward to. Yeah. There we go. And then on Friday, I'm going to be going through my sort of project that we've been working on in live coding for a bit and completely redoing the intents. The way they are now is bad, so I'm going to make them less bad, which I think is like a pretty common problem that folks run into as a project organically grows over time. So hopefully will be interesting and useful. And then next Wednesday, we'll have more office hours. So thank you so much for joining, Ella.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining chat.
Fun.
And I'll see y'all later.